Winston Churchill, The Wartime Leader. Written and published by Ciro Ermisai. Feel free to subscribe for more content. Now let's get into the book. Introduction: The Making of a Leader. In the annals of history, few names evoke as much admiration and fascination as Winston Churchill. His legacy as a wartime leader, orator, and unwavering patriot is woven deeply into the fabric of British history. Churchill's tenure as the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom during World War II was marked by profound challenges, bold decisions, and a steadfast commitment to preserving freedom against the rising tide of tyranny. But Churchill's journey to this point was far from straightforward. It was the culmination of a lifetime of personal battles, career highs and lows, and an unshakable belief in his mission to defend his nation's values. Churchill's life story reads like an epic, a tale of courage, resilience, and brilliance mixed with a healthy dose of controversy. Born into a prominent family with deep roots in British aristocracy, Churchill's early life offered him both privilege and unique challenges. As the son of Lord Randolph Churchill, a respected politician, and Jenny Jerome, a dynamic American socialite, Winston inherited a legacy of public service yet battled personal insecurities and the weight of expectation. He faced setbacks and disapproval, both at home and in his career, that might have deterred a less determined soul. Instead, Churchill used these experiences to forge a steely resolve, one that would later serve him and his country when the stakes were at their highest. The path to Churchill's role as Prime Minister was anything but linear. His early military service brought him face to face with the realities of war, allowing him to see both the glories and horrors of the battlefield. These experiences shaped his views on military strategy, informed his understanding of leadership under pressure, and gave him an unwavering commitment to peace, even when he knew that peace could sometimes only be won through war. In the years that followed, Churchill's political career took many turns, marked by both success and failure, popular acclaim and public skepticism. However, through each setback, he emerged with a clearer sense of purpose and an even stronger determination to protect Britain's future. By the time Churchill assumed the role of Prime Minister in 1940, Europe was already engulfed in the flames of war. Germany, under Adolf Hitler, had unleashed a relentless campaign of conquest, and Britain's very survival hung in the balance. Many doubted that Britain could withstand the onslaught. Yet, Churchill believed not only in Britain's resilience but also in the strength of its people. Through his powerful oratory and resolute leadership, he rallied a nation teetering on the brink of despair. His speeches, marked by words that resonated with clarity and courage, transformed the bleakest of circumstances into a call to action, inspiring hope and instilling a determination to fight on, regardless of the odds. This book embarks on a journey through Winston Churchill's life, focusing on the years when he stood at the helm of Britain during World War II. We will examine his personal sacrifices, his strategic brilliance, and his relationships with other key Allied leaders. As we uncover the essence of his wartime leadership, we also seek to understand the legacy he left behind, a legacy that extends beyond victory in battle to the principles of freedom, resilience, and unity. Churchill once said, "Success is not final, failure is not fatal, it is the courage to continue that counts." In exploring the pivotal moments of his life, his strategic choices, and his powerful speeches, this book aims to illustrate how Churchill's courage to continue became the lifeblood of a nation. His story reminds us that true leadership, especially in times of crisis, is defined not by unbroken success but by an unwavering commitment to one's ideals and responsibilities, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. This introduction has set the stage for a closer look at the life and leadership of Winston Churchill, the leader who, against all odds, led his people from the edge of defeat to the dawn of victory. Chapter 1. A Rising Star in Politics. Winston Churchill's journey to political prominence is a story of determination, daring, and resilience. Long before he became a household name as Britain's wartime leader, Churchill was a young man with lofty ambitions, eager to make his mark on both the military and political arenas. This chapter delves into Churchill's early years, exploring how his background, character, and military experience positioned him for a career in politics and, ultimately, leadership. Early life and the formation of character. Churchill was born on November 30, 1874, at Blenheim Palace, the grand ancestral home of the Duke of Marlborough. As the son of Lord Randolph Churchill and Jenny Jerome, Winston had a unique upbringing that blended British aristocratic values with the spirited independence of his American mother. Yet, despite his privileged environment, young Winston faced considerable emotional challenges. His father was a charismatic but often distant figure, whose career in politics both inspired and overshadowed his son. This lack of a close paternal bond was a source of pain for Winston, yet it also fueled a desire to prove himself. He longed for his father's approval and sought to surpass him in both reputation and accomplishments. In his youth, Churchill was not particularly studious. In fact, he struggled academically, especially at Harrow, the prestigious boarding school where he received his formal education. Nevertheless, his teachers noted an unusual tenacity and a vivid imagination. These traits, combined with an insatiable curiosity and a tendency to challenge authority, marked him as someone who would not follow the traditional paths of his peers. Instead, Churchill pursued his interests with a fierce independence, often immersing himself in literature and history, subjects that would later shape his worldview and oratorical skills. Military beginnings and lessons in courage. After his academic performance at Harrow, Churchill faced limited prospects within traditional academic institutions. His lackluster performance on entrance exams led him to enroll at the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst, where he found an unexpected outlet for his adventurous spirit. At Sandhurst, he thrived, graduating 8th in his class and eventually joining the British Army. His first taste of military service came in India and later in Sudan, where he participated in the cavalry charge at the Battle of Omdurman in 1898. These early military experiences taught him about the brutality of war and the courage required to face it. During this time, Churchill also began a career in journalism, which would significantly boost his reputation. His dispatches from battle zones, filled with vivid descriptions and keen insights, showcased his talent for communication and painted him as a daring young officer unafraid to confront danger. His coverage of the Second Boer War in South Africa proved particularly notable. Captured during an ambush, Churchill managed a dramatic escape, which he recounted in thrilling detail. This incident made him a public hero in Britain and underscored his bravery and ingenuity. Upon his return, Churchill capitalized on his newfound fame to launch his political career. Entering the political arena. In 1900, at just 26 years old, Churchill was elected as the Member of Parliament for Oldham, representing the Conservative Party. His election marked the beginning of a political career that would span over 6 decades and see him occupy numerous high-profile positions. However, Churchill's early political years were anything but smooth. His independent spirit and willingness to criticize his own party's policies soon made him an outsider. In 1904, frustrated with the Conservative Party's stance on free trade, a policy he felt was essential for British economic growth, Churchill made the controversial decision to cross the floor and join the Liberal Party. This bold move, which attracted both admiration and scorn, demonstrated Churchill's deep-seated commitment to his principles. For him, political allegiance was not an absolute but a tool through which he could better serve his beliefs and, in his view, the nation's best interests. His stance on issues such as free trade, social reform, and military modernization distinguished him within the Liberal Party, where he quickly rose through the ranks. The reformist vision. As a liberal, Churchill secured several high-profile posts, including Under-Secretary of State for the Colonies and, later, President of the Board of Trade. During his tenure in these roles, he championed social reforms that aimed to improve the lives of Britain's working-class citizens. His efforts helped lay the foundation for what would become the welfare state. Churchill introduced measures such as unemployment insurance, the establishment of labor exchanges, and pension provisions. His progressive vision marked him as a politician who genuinely sought to improve social conditions, a commitment that earned him respect and popularity among his constituents. This reformist approach was not without its critics. Many in the conservative establishment viewed Churchill's social policies as radical, even threatening to the status quo. Yet, Churchill was undeterred. He believed that Britain's prosperity and stability hinged on addressing the needs of all citizens, not just the privileged elite. These convictions would remain with him throughout his life, defining his approach to leadership and government. The Admiralty and early strategic acumen. Churchill's career took another significant turn in 1911 when he was appointed First Lord of the Admiralty. This position placed him in charge of the British Navy, a role he relished and approached with characteristic energy. Recognizing the growing threat posed by an increasingly militarized Germany, Churchill embarked on a sweeping program of naval modernization. He was instrumental in introducing new battleships, including the powerful Dreadnought class, which bolstered Britain's naval supremacy. His work at the Admiralty revealed not only his strategic foresight but also his understanding of the importance of preparedness, a principle that would later define his stance on national defense. Churchill's tenure at the Admiralty also included his involvement in World War I, particularly in the ill-fated Gallipoli campaign, a bold yet ultimately disastrous attempt to seize control of the Dardanelles Strait. The campaign ended in failure, resulting in heavy casualties and a significant blow to Churchill's career. The political fallout forced him to resign from the Admiralty, and his reputation suffered. However, rather than retreat from public life, Churchill sought redemption by serving on the Western Front as a battalion commander. This period of reflection and humility would serve as a crucible for his character, reinforcing his resilience and strengthening his resolve. Lessons from adversity. The years following Gallipoli were challenging for Churchill, both personally and politically. He faced criticism, isolation, and the humiliation of being marginalized within the political sphere. Yet, these experiences taught him valuable lessons about leadership and the heavy price of failure. Churchill's time away from the forefront of politics allowed him to reflect on his decisions, refine his vision, and build a profound sense of accountability that would later define his wartime leadership. In time, Churchill returned to government service, continuing his ascent through a series of influential roles. By the time the 1930s arrived, he had gained a reputation as one of Britain's most experienced and outspoken politicians. Despite the missteps and controversies of his early career, he was respected as a man who had seen the horrors of war firsthand and who possessed the courage to face hard truths. By 1939, Churchill was a seasoned politician with a unique blend of military experience, political insight, and a relentless drive for national security. As Europe descended once more into conflict, Churchill found himself as the lone voice warning against the growing menace of Nazi Germany. His early years in politics, characterized by both ambition and adversity, had prepared him for a time when his leadership and vision would be tested to the fullest. Chapter 2: The Prelude to War. As Winston Churchill observed the political landscape of Europe throughout the 1930s, he grew increasingly alarmed by the rise of Adolf Hitler and the aggressive expansionist policies of Nazi Germany. While other political leaders favored appeasement or remained optimistic that war could be avoided, Churchill's warnings grew louder and more frequent. This chapter explores the political and social conditions of the pre-war years, Churchill's early recognition of the Nazi threat, and his tireless efforts to prepare Britain for the possibility of a conflict many hoped would never come. Europe on the brink. The aftermath of World War I left Europe in a fragile state, with the Treaty of Versailles imposing heavy reparations and territorial restrictions on Germany. While the treaty aimed to prevent Germany from becoming a military threat again, it also fostered resentment and economic hardship within the country. These conditions provided fertile ground for radical ideologies to take root, and Hitler, with his promises of German revival and dominance, found a receptive audience. By the time Hitler ascended to power in 1933, he had already laid out his vision for Germany in Mein Kampf, advocating for the unification of German-speaking peoples and expansion into Eastern Europe. As the Nazis systematically dismantled democratic institutions in Germany and began rebuilding the military, Europe watched with a mixture of concern and disbelief. Many political leaders across the continent were eager to avoid another catastrophic war and hoped that Hitler's ambitions could be contained through diplomacy. In Britain, public sentiment strongly favored peace. The horrors of World War I remained fresh in the collective memory, and the British public was wary of any action that could lead to another conflict. Politicians echoed these sentiments, promoting a policy of appeasement toward Germany in the belief that concessions would secure peace. However, Churchill viewed this policy with disdain. His years of military experience and deep understanding of European geopolitics led him to conclude that Nazi Germany posed an existential threat that could not be placated. Churchill's warnings, a lone voice in Parliament. As Hitler's regime grew more brazen, Churchill began issuing stark warnings in Parliament. He argued that Nazi Germany's rearmament and expansionist policies were clear indicators of a looming conflict. However, Churchill's stance was not widely supported. Many of his contemporaries viewed him as an alarmist, even a warmonger, and dismissed his concerns as exaggerated. Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, a proponent of appeasement, believed that diplomacy and negotiation could prevent war and saw Churchill's rhetoric as unnecessarily provocative. Churchill's warnings intensified following Germany's reoccupation of the Rhineland in 1936, a move that blatantly violated the Treaty of Versailles. For Churchill, this was a pivotal moment, a clear sign that Hitler was testing the resolve of the Allied powers. Yet, Britain and France did nothing to oppose this action, reinforcing Churchill's belief that the policy of appeasement was emboldening rather than deterring Hitler. He argued that the longer Europe delayed confronting Germany, the stronger and more dangerous the Nazi regime would become. Despite the growing evidence of Germany's intentions, Churchill's voice remained a minority in Parliament. In his speeches, he emphasized the importance of rearming Britain and preparing for the possibility of war. He believed that Britain's defenses were woefully inadequate to counter the military threat posed by Germany and called for increased funding for the Navy, Air Force, and Army. Yet his pleas fell largely on deaf ears, as many politicians clung to the hope that peace could be preserved. The Munich Agreement, the fateful decision. One of the most significant moments of the pre-war years was the signing of the Munich Agreement in 1938. Hitler had demanded the Sudetenland, a region of Czechoslovakia with a large ethnic German population, claiming that it should be part of Germany. Fearing that resisting Hitler's demand would spark a war, Britain and France chose to negotiate. Chamberlain, in a highly publicized move, flew to Munich to meet with Hitler and other European leaders in an effort to secure peace. The result was an agreement allowing Germany to annex the Sudetenland in exchange for a promise from Hitler that he would make no further territorial demands. Chamberlain returned to Britain declaring peace for our time, confident that he had averted war. The British public, desperate to believe that conflict had been avoided, celebrated this outcome. But Churchill viewed the Munich Agreement as a betrayal of Czechoslovakia and a grievous mistake. In his view, it was not peace that had been secured but a temporary postponement of an inevitable war, with Hitler emerging even more powerful and emboldened. In a powerful speech to Parliament, Churchill famously condemned the Munich Agreement, stating, "You were given the choice between war and dishonor. You chose dishonor, and you will have war." This statement underscored his belief that appeasement was not only morally wrong but strategically disastrous. He argued that by yielding to Hitler's demands, Britain and France had weakened their own positions and increased the likelihood of a larger conflict. Preparing for the inevitable. Churchill's opposition to appeasement did not make him popular, but he continued his crusade for rearmament and national defense. As he saw Germany expanding its military and testing new strategies in Spain during the Spanish Civil War, Churchill warned that Britain was dangerously unprepared. He stressed the importance of modernizing the Royal Air Force, RAF, predicting that air superiority would be crucial in any future war. Churchill's concern extended beyond Germany to Italy and Japan, as he recognized that Britain's global empire faced threats on multiple fronts. He urged the government to adopt a comprehensive defense strategy that would protect Britain's interests worldwide. His calls for greater investment in anti-aircraft defenses, radar technology, and naval fortifications reflected his understanding of modern warfare's shifting dynamics. Although Churchill's pleas continued to be ignored by much of the government, He began to gain the support of a small group of MPs and military officials who shared his concerns. They saw Churchill as a man who was willing to speak the uncomfortable truth, even when it went against popular opinion. This growing support laid the groundwork for Churchill's eventual return to power, as it became clear that Britain would need a leader with both the vision and resolve to face the looming threat. The collapse of appeasement. In March 1939, Hitler's forces invaded and occupied the rest of Czechoslovakia, violating the Munich Agreement and shattering any remaining hopes of peace. The British public, shocked by Hitler's blatant disregard for diplomacy, began to realize that Churchill's warnings had not been exaggerated. Public opinion shifted, and calls for stronger national defenses grew louder. In response to Germany's aggression, Britain and France extended guarantees to Poland, pledging to support the nation if it were attacked by Germany. This marked a turning point in British foreign policy and a tacit acknowledgement that appeasement had failed. Churchill's persistent warnings about the Nazi threat had finally gained wider acceptance, though he continued to urge for immediate and decisive action to bolster Britain's defenses. With Hitler's invasion of Poland in September 1939, Britain's long period of indecision came to an end. On September 3, Britain and France declared war on Germany, marking the beginning of World War II. Churchill was appointed First Lord of the Admiralty, resuming the role he had held during World War I. For Churchill, this appointment was both a vindication of his long-held beliefs and a solemn responsibility. He knew that Britain faced an existential crisis and that the coming months would test the nation's resilience and resolve. Churchill's vision for leadership in crisis. As Churchill returned to the Admiralty, he understood that Britain's situation was precarious. Years of underinvestment in the military and reliance on appeasement had left the country vulnerable. Yet, Churchill's sense of purpose and conviction in Britain's ultimate victory never wavered. He believed that a nation, properly led and united, could overcome even the most daunting of challenges. Churchill's experience in the pre-war years had prepared him for this moment. His deep understanding of military strategy, his commitment to rearmament, and his unshakable resolve to defend Britain at all costs would guide his leadership in the years to come. He knew that winning the war would require not only military strength but also the unbreakable spirit of the British people, a spirit he would inspire and nurture through his speeches and actions. The prelude to World War II was marked by a period of dangerous complacency, as Britain and other European nations sought to avoid conflict through appeasement. Churchill, a lone voice in the wilderness, recognized the threat posed by Nazi Germany long before others did and fought tirelessly to prepare Britain for the coming storm. His warnings, initially dismissed, eventually proved prophetic, and his relentless calls for rearmament laid the foundation for Britain's wartime defense. Chapter 3: The Darkest Hour. In May 1940, Winston Churchill stepped into his role as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom under dire circumstances. Nazi Germany had swept across Europe with startling speed, using a brutal new tactic of warfare known as blitzkrieg, or lightning war, to overpower the armies of nation after nation. As France crumbled and the British Army found itself encircled and in retreat, the United Kingdom faced the grim prospect of invasion. Within days of his appointment, Churchill was thrust into a crisis of historic proportions, a challenge that would test his leadership, resolve, and vision for Britain's survival. This chapter examines the dramatic events surrounding Churchill's appointment as Prime Minister, his immediate actions to steady the nation, and the famous speeches that rallied the British people. As we explore these pivotal moments, we see how Churchill's unwavering determination became a beacon of hope for a nation facing what he would later call its finest hour. The road to leadership. Churchill's ascent to the position of Prime Minister was far from a foregone conclusion. In early 1940, his relationship with many senior Conservative Party members, as well as with King George VI, was complicated. Known for his often polarizing personality and previous controversies, such as the disastrous Gallipoli campaign during World War I, Churchill was seen by some as a risky choice for leadership. However, his outspoken warnings about Nazi Germany, which had once made him an isolated figure in Parliament, were now being viewed as prescient. As Hitler's ambitions became undeniable, Churchill's years of advocating for rearmament and national readiness proved he had the insight and courage to lead in a time of war. On May 10, 1940, after Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain's policy of appeasement had been thoroughly discredited, King George VI appointed Churchill to lead the nation. Churchill understood the weight of this moment. Britain's very survival depended on his ability to unite the country and withstand the relentless Nazi onslaught. Reflecting on his new position, he remarked, "I felt as if I were walking with destiny, and that all my past life had been but a preparation for this hour and for this trial." This belief in his purpose would sustain him through the challenges that lay ahead. The fall of France and the threat of invasion. One of Churchill's first tasks as Prime Minister was managing the fallout from the German invasion of France. The swift collapse of the French defenses stunned the world, revealing the devastating effectiveness of the German war machine. By mid-May, German forces had pushed Allied troops to the French coastline, threatening to eliminate the British Expeditionary Force, BEF, which was trapped in the port city of Dunkirk. Realizing that the evacuation of the BEF was critical to Britain's ability to continue the war, Churchill ordered Operation Dynamo, a massive rescue mission that would require not only military ships but also civilian vessels to bring British soldiers back across the English Channel. In what became known as the Miracle of Dunkirk, over 338,000 British and Allied troops were rescued by a makeshift fleet of warships, fishing boats, and pleasure crafts. While Dunkirk was not a military victory, Churchill framed it as a triumph of resilience and determination. He told the nation that while wars are not won by evacuations, the bravery and solidarity shown by the British people in bringing their soldiers home would fuel their fight for survival. With France on the brink of surrender, Britain now stood alone against the seemingly unstoppable Nazi war machine. Churchill knew that Hitler intended to conquer Britain next. The British people were gripped by fear, anticipating invasion at any moment. Churchill's immediate task was to prepare the country for this dire possibility. He bolstered the nation's defenses, urging citizens to dig trenches, set up barricades, and form local defense forces, including the newly established Home Guard, comprised of volunteers ready to defend their towns if the Nazis landed. The speeches that shaped a nation. Recognizing the importance of morale, Churchill turned to one of his greatest strengths, his oratory skills. His speeches during these critical early months not only informed the public of the gravity of their situation but also inspired them to believe in their ability to withstand and overcome. Through words alone, Churchill became the rallying point for British resolve, uniting a nation that was teetering on the edge of despair. In his first speech as Prime Minister, delivered to the House of Commons on May 13, 1940, Churchill addressed the challenge head-on. Declaring that he had nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat, he conveyed both the severity of the struggle and his unflinching commitment to victory. This speech, now iconic, set the tone for his wartime leadership. Churchill's directness and honesty resonated with the British people, assuring them that their leader would not shy away from the harsh realities of their situation. A month later, following the evacuation at Dunkirk, Churchill delivered another powerful speech, declaring, "We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall fight in the fields and in the streets, we shall fight in the hills, we shall never surrender." These words gave voice to Britain's determination and steeled the public's resolve. By emphasizing the nation's unbreakable spirit and refusal to yield, Churchill transformed the Dunkirk evacuation from a retreat into a symbol of resilience. Finally, on June 18, Churchill delivered his famous finest hour speech, rallying the nation and preparing them for the difficult road ahead. "Let us therefore brace ourselves to our duties," he declared, "and so bear ourselves that, if the British Empire and its Commonwealth last for 1,000 years, men will still say, this was their finest hour." This address not only galvanized the British people but also signaled to the world that Britain would fight on, regardless of the challenges. Defending the home front. Beyond his inspiring speeches, Churchill took practical steps to prepare the nation for a prolonged conflict. His focus on building Britain's defenses included ramping up aircraft production, improving anti-aircraft defenses, and organizing the civilian population for the eventuality of bombing raids. His leadership extended to overseeing the rationing of essential supplies, mobilizing workers to produce war materials, and coordinating with scientists to develop radar and other technologies that would prove crucial in the coming battles. One of Churchill's most significant achievements during this time was his emphasis on the Royal Air Force, RAF, recognizing that air power would play a pivotal role in Britain's survival. Under his leadership, the RAF was expanded and modernized, preparing for the defense of Britain's skies. The investment in aircraft production and the strategic use of radar technology gave Britain a crucial advantage, setting the stage for what would become the Battle of Britain. The cabinet and Churchill's inner circle. As Prime Minister, Churchill surrounded himself with a close-knit team of advisors, military leaders, and ministers, many of whom would become instrumental in shaping Britain's wartime strategy. One of his most trusted allies was Air Chief Marshal Sir Hugh Dowding, who would later lead the RAF in the Battle of Britain. Churchill also valued the expertise of Minister of Aircraft Production Lord Beaverbrook, whose efforts accelerated aircraft manufacturing, ensuring that Britain had the resources to defend itself. Churchill's leadership style was intense and, at times, abrasive. He was known for his relentless work ethic and high expectations, often holding late-night meetings and demanding exhaustive efforts from his team. However, his passion and dedication earned him the respect and loyalty of those around him. Despite occasional conflicts, his advisors and military commanders recognized his unwavering commitment to victory and his belief that Britain's very survival depended on their collective resolve. The moral imperative and Churchill's vision. At the heart of Churchill's leadership was a deep moral conviction that Britain's fight was not merely a military struggle but a defense of civilization itself. He saw the conflict with Nazi Germany as a battle between freedom and tyranny, between democratic values and totalitarian oppression. This sense of moral clarity drove him to pursue victory at all costs, believing that a defeat would not only mean the fall of Britain but also the loss of everything he held dear. Churchill's vision for Britain's role in the war was clear. He saw Britain as a beacon of hope for all free peoples. His insistence on resisting Hitler, even when the odds seemed overwhelmingly against him, made Britain a symbol of courage and defiance. Churchill's personal commitment to the cause, his refusal to entertain any thought of surrender, reinforced his image as a leader who would fight to the very end. His conviction inspired not only the British people but also the Allied nations, who looked to Britain as a stalwart against the tide of fascism. In these early days of his premiership, Winston Churchill proved himself as a leader who could rally his nation through the darkest hours. His speeches, actions, and unbreakable resolve transformed Britain's fear and uncertainty into a fierce determination to stand against tyranny. Churchill's words offered hope when hope seemed lost, instilling a belief in the British people that, together, they could endure and ultimately prevail. As the clouds of war gathered more thickly over Britain, the next challenge loomed on the horizon, the Battle of Britain. Churchill's preparation of the RAF, his strategic foresight, and his ability to inspire a fighting spirit would soon be put to the ultimate test as Hitler's forces turned their attention to the skies above the British Isles. The following chapter will delve into the epic aerial battle that would prove a turning point in the war and solidify Churchill's place in history as Britain's indomitable wartime leader. Chapter 4. The Battle of Britain. By the summer of 1940, Winston Churchill's darkest predictions had come true. Britain now stood alone against Nazi Germany, with the fall of France leaving the United Kingdom as the last bastion of resistance in Western Europe. Hitler, confident after his series of rapid victories, turned his focus toward Britain, aiming to crush the nation's defenses and bring it under German control. For Britain, survival depended on one critical factor: control of the skies. What unfolded over the next few months would come to be known as the Battle of Britain, a fierce and historic struggle between the Royal Air Force, RAF, and the German Luftwaffe, which sought to dominate British airspace in preparation for a full-scale invasion. This chapter explores the strategic importance of the Battle of Britain, Churchill's pivotal role in preparing the nation's defenses, and the courage displayed by the RAF pilots, whom he would famously call the Few. Through Churchill's leadership and the heroism of those defending Britain's skies, the Battle of Britain became a turning point in the war, proving that Hitler's forces could be resisted and giving hope to a world plunged into darkness. Hitler's plan, Operation Sea Lion. After defeating France, Hitler devised Operation Sea Lion, a plan for the invasion of Britain. However, he and his military advisors knew that any invasion would require air superiority over the English Channel and southern England. The Luftwaffe, under the command of Hermann Göring, was tasked with destroying the RAF and neutralizing British air defenses to pave the way for the invasion. Hitler initially hoped that Britain might seek peace after the fall of France, believing that the British people would not be willing to endure the hardships of war. But Churchill, refusing to consider surrender, made it clear that Britain would fight to the very end. Frustrated by Britain's defiance, Hitler authorized the Luftwaffe to launch an all-out air assault on Britain. Thus began the Battle of Britain, a campaign that would test both the RAF's resilience and the will of the British people. Churchill's preparation and strategic vision. Churchill understood the strategic importance of air power better than most of his contemporaries, having previously advocated for the expansion and modernization of the RAF. His foresight in this regard proved invaluable as the battle began. Upon becoming Prime Minister, he appointed Sir Hugh Dowding as head of RAF Fighter Command, entrusting him with the enormous responsibility of defending British skies. Dowding, a calm and methodical strategist, had already overseen the development of an innovative air defense system that would be crucial in the coming conflict. This system, known as the Dowding system, integrated radar technology with ground-based observation posts, allowing the RAF to detect incoming German aircraft with remarkable accuracy. Radar stations along the coast provided early warnings of Luftwaffe attacks, enabling RAF squadrons to intercept enemy formations before they could reach their targets. Churchill's support for radar research and his backing of Dowding's leadership demonstrated his understanding that technological innovation could give Britain a decisive edge. Churchill also worked closely with Lord Beaverbrook, the Minister of Aircraft Production, to ensure a steady supply of fighter planes. Under Beaverbrook's guidance, aircraft production was ramped up, with factories working around the clock to build Spitfires and Hurricanes, the two main fighter aircraft that would become symbols of British resistance. Churchill's priority was to keep the RAF well supplied and ready for combat, knowing that every plane and every pilot could make the difference between survival and defeat. The Luftwaffe's assault begins. In July 1940, the Luftwaffe began its initial attacks on British shipping convoys in the English Channel, aiming to disrupt Britain's supply lines and draw the RAF into battle. As these attacks escalated, the Luftwaffe shifted its focus to RAF airfields and radar installations, hoping to cripple Britain's defensive capabilities. This phase of the Battle of Britain, known as Adlertag or Eagle Day, marked the beginning of an intense bombing campaign aimed at weakening the RAF and paving the way for a full-scale invasion. German bombers, escorted by Messerschmitt fighters, launched relentless attacks on airfields across southern England, targeting both fighter command bases and radar stations. These raids inflicted heavy damage on the RAF, straining its resources and putting immense pressure on its pilots. Churchill, fully aware of the stakes, stayed closely informed of the situation, frequently visiting Dowding and his staff to discuss strategy and boost morale. As the battle intensified, the RAF's fighter pilots, known for their bravery and skill, faced grueling and often deadly missions. Many of them were young, with limited experience, yet they displayed extraordinary courage as they took to the skies day after day. The Spitfires and Hurricanes they flew were often outnumbered by the German aircraft, but their agility and speed, combined with the skill of the British pilots, made them formidable opponents. These pilots came from across the British Commonwealth and even from occupied countries, forming a diverse group united by their commitment to defend Britain. The few, Churchill's tribute to the RAF pilots. As the Battle of Britain raged on, Churchill was deeply moved by the courage of the RAF pilots who risked their lives daily to defend the nation. He understood the personal sacrifices they were making and the emotional toll that the relentless fighting took on them. In a speech to Parliament on August 20, 1940, Churchill paid tribute to these heroes with words that would become immortal. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. This phrase, honoring the few who fought for the survival of Britain, resonated with the public and became a rallying cry for the nation. It reminded the British people of the sacrifices being made on their behalf and strengthened their resolve to support the war effort. The pilots of the RAF became symbols of British courage and defiance, embodying the spirit that Churchill sought to instill in his countrymen. The nation's gratitude for their bravery was profound, and their actions inspired not only Britain but also the Allied nations, who saw in them the possibility of victory against seemingly insurmountable odds. The turning point, the Luftwaffe changes tactics. By September 1940, the Luftwaffe had failed to destroy the RAF, despite weeks of relentless bombing. Frustrated by the RAF's resilience and Britain's refusal to capitulate, Hitler and Göring made a critical strategic error. They shifted their focus from targeting RAF airfields to bombing London and other major cities in a campaign known as the Blitz. The decision to attack civilian areas was intended to break British morale and force Churchill to surrender. However, it had the opposite effect. The Blitz, which brought terror and destruction to Britain's cities, galvanized the British people, uniting them in a shared struggle against the invader. Churchill, understanding the power of unity, used the attacks on London to reinforce his message of resilience. He visited bombed-out neighborhoods, speaking with civilians and offering words of encouragement. His visible presence during the Blitz reassured the public and demonstrated that he shared in their suffering and determination. The Luftwaffe's shift in strategy allowed the RAF a crucial reprieve, enabling it to regroup, repair damaged airfields, and replace lost aircraft. By focusing on civilian targets, the Luftwaffe inadvertently allowed the RAF to recover and regain its strength, ultimately turning the tide in favor of Britain. Victory in the skies. Throughout September and October, the RAF continued to repel German attacks, inflicting significant losses on the Luftwaffe. The resilience of Britain's defenses and the effectiveness of the Dowding system played a decisive role in preventing Germany from achieving air superiority. The Luftwaffe, having suffered heavy casualties and failing to secure control of the skies, was forced to abandon its plans for Operation Sea Lion. Hitler postponed the invasion indefinitely, and the Battle of Britain came to a close. Britain's victory in the Battle of Britain marked a turning point in the war. It was the first major defeat of Hitler's military forces, proving that the Nazis were not invincible. This victory bolstered Allied morale and sent a powerful message to the world that Britain would not yield. For Churchill, the outcome of the battle validated his faith in the British people and in the RAF, whose pilots had fulfilled his prediction that the Fugue would bear the weight of Britain's defense. The lasting impact of the Battle of Britain. The Battle of Britain was more than just a military victory. It was a triumph of spirit, ingenuity, and determination. Churchill's leadership during this time, marked by his unwavering commitment to victory and his ability to inspire both the military and civilians, helped to forge a sense of national unity. The victory also laid the groundwork for the Allied partnership, as the United States took note of Britain's resilience and began to view it as a strong and worthy ally in the fight against fascism. Churchill's speeches during the Battle of Britain became legendary, embodying the defiance and courage that defined the British war effort. His words rallied the nation and gave the people a sense of purpose, transforming the darkest of times into moments of collective pride. The legacy of the battle and of Churchill's leadership would endure long after the war, symbolizing the strength of a people who refused to be conquered. The Battle of Britain tested Churchill's leadership, the RAF's resilience, and the resolve of the British people. Through Churchill's preparation, strategic insight, and unwavering faith in the few, Britain withstood the onslaught and emerged victorious. This victory was a testament to Churchill's belief in the power of unity and courage, proving that even the most daunting challenges could be overcome with the right leadership and spirit. Chapter 5: Allies and Strategy. With the Battle of Britain successfully repelling the immediate threat of invasion, Winston Churchill turned his attention toward a larger, more complex goal: forging the international alliances necessary to defeat the Axis powers. Churchill understood that Britain could not win the war alone. To achieve victory, he would need to secure the support of powerful allies, most notably the United States and the Soviet Union. This chapter examines Churchill's strategic diplomatic efforts, his relationships with Allied leaders Franklin D. Roosevelt and Joseph Stalin, and the military strategies that emerged from these alliances, which would ultimately shape the course of World War II. The importance of alliances in Churchill's vision. Churchill's strategic vision was rooted in his understanding that World War II was a global conflict that could not be won by Britain in isolation. He recognized the immense industrial and military potential of the United States, whose resources and technological capabilities far exceeded those of any other nation. He also understood the value of the Soviet Union's vast manpower and geographic positioning on Germany's Eastern Front. Together, the combined strength of these three nations could bring Hitler's forces to heel. However, forging these alliances was no simple task. The United States remained officially neutral, and public opinion was largely against entering another European conflict after the devastation of World War I. The Soviet Union, meanwhile, was ideologically opposed to Britain and viewed Western powers with deep suspicion. Nevertheless, Churchill was undeterred. He saw it as his mission not only to secure Britain's survival but also to unite disparate nations in a common cause against fascism. Courting the United States, the special relationship with Roosevelt. Churchill's relationship with U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt was pivotal to the Allied war effort. From the moment Churchill became Prime Minister, he reached out to Roosevelt, recognizing the importance of cultivating a close bond with the American leader. Churchill's initial letters to Roosevelt were personal, heartfelt, and direct, painting a vivid picture of the British struggle and appealing to the shared values of freedom and democracy that he believed both nations held dear. Roosevelt, for his part, was sympathetic to Britain's plight but constrained by U.S. isolationist policies and a public that largely opposed joining the war. However, as Germany's aggressions grew more alarming, Roosevelt began taking steps to support Britain indirectly. In March 1941, he signed the Lend-Lease Act, which allowed the United States to provide Britain with critical supplies, including weapons, ships, and raw materials, without demanding immediate payment. This act marked a turning point in the relationship, as it enabled Britain to continue its fight against Germany with the backing of American industry. Churchill and Roosevelt exchanged hundreds of letters and telegrams over the course of the war, establishing a deep bond that went beyond mere diplomacy. Churchill visited Roosevelt in Washington several times, where the two leaders held long, often informal discussions about war strategy, post-war aims, and their mutual desire for a world built on peace and security. Churchill's charm, humor, and eloquence won over the American public as well, and his 1941 visit to the United States, where he addressed Congress, cemented his image as a heroic figure fighting for freedom. His famous line, "Give us the tools, and we will finish the job," resonated deeply, capturing the resilience of Britain and the importance of American support. As the war continued, Churchill and Roosevelt worked together to create a shared vision for the Allied powers. Their Atlantic Charter, signed in August 1941, outlined their goals for the post-war world, including commitments to self-determination, economic cooperation, and peace. This document would later become the foundation for the United Nations, reflecting Churchill's belief that international cooperation was essential not only to winning the war but also to preventing future conflicts. The reluctant alliance with the Soviet Union. While Churchill's partnership with Roosevelt was grounded in mutual respect and shared democratic ideals, his relationship with Soviet leader Joseph Stalin was far more complex. Churchill had long been wary of communism and had once even advocated for military intervention against the Bolsheviks during the Russian Civil War. Stalin, for his part, viewed Britain with deep suspicion, seeing it as a capitalist imperial power that posed a threat to Soviet interests. Nevertheless, Hitler's decision to invade the Soviet Union in June 1941 forced Churchill and Stalin into an uneasy alliance. Despite his distrust, Churchill acted swiftly to offer Britain's support to the Soviet Union after the German invasion, famously stating, "If Hitler invaded hell, I would make at least a favorable reference to the devil in the House of Commons." This pragmatic approach underscored Churchill's understanding that defeating Nazi Germany was the primary goal, transcending ideological differences. Churchill sent supplies and military aid to the Soviet Union through the perilous Arctic convoys, which faced constant threats from German U-boats and Luftwaffe attacks. He also made diplomatic overtures to Stalin, offering Britain's solidarity and emphasizing their shared interest in defeating Hitler. In 1942, Churchill traveled to Moscow to meet with Stalin in person, a challenging and often tense encounter. Churchill found Stalin to be a formidable, calculating leader with little patience for what he viewed as British hesitancy in opening a second front in Western Europe. The relationship between Churchill and Stalin was never warm, but it was built on mutual necessity. Churchill understood that the Soviet Union's immense military resources were crucial to keeping Germany occupied on the Eastern Front, which in turn relieved pressure on Britain. Despite their ideological differences and frequent disagreements over strategy, Churchill and Stalin managed to maintain a functional alliance, which ultimately played a decisive role in weakening Germany. The combined chiefs of staff and strategic coordination. With the United States now an active participant following the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, Churchill, Roosevelt, and their military advisors began coordinating their efforts through the combined chiefs of staff. This alliance brought together the top military leaders of the United States and the United Kingdom, allowing them to plan joint operations, share intelligence, and coordinate resources. Churchill's strategic vision and his deep knowledge of military affairs made him a key figure in these discussions, where he often pushed for bold and aggressive action. One of Churchill's central strategic goals was to launch a major offensive in Europe to relieve pressure on the Soviet Union. However, this objective required careful planning, as a full-scale invasion of Nazi-occupied Europe would be an enormous and risky undertaking. Churchill initially advocated for a Mediterranean strategy, arguing that the Allies could weaken Germany by attacking its forces in North Africa and then moving through Italy, which he called the soft underbelly of Europe. This approach, while more gradual than a direct invasion of France, allowed the Allies to build momentum and experience without confronting Germany's strongest defenses head-on. In 1942, Churchill's strategy proved successful with the Allied victory in North Africa. The British Eighth Army, led by General Bernard Montgomery, defeated German Field Marshal Erwin Rommel's forces at the Battle of El Alamein. This victory marked a turning point in the North African campaign and opened the way for the Allied invasion of Italy in 1943. Churchill was jubilant, famously stating, "Before Alamein, we never had a victory. After Alamein, we never had a defeat." The North African and Italian campaigns demonstrated the effectiveness of Churchill's Mediterranean strategy and provided valuable experience for Allied forces, preparing them for the eventual invasion of France. Planning Operation Overlord, the path to D-Day. As the war progressed, Churchill and Roosevelt began focusing on the long-awaited invasion of Western Europe. Churchill was initially cautious about a cross-channel invasion, fearing that it would result in heavy casualties if the Allies were unprepared. However, he eventually agreed to the plan, codenamed Operation Overlord, after extensive planning and preparation. The Normandy invasion would be the largest amphibious assault in history, involving a coordinated attack by land, sea, and air. Churchill's role in planning Operation Overlord was critical. He worked closely with General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the Supreme Allied Commander, to ensure that the operation would have the necessary resources and support. Churchill also coordinated with Stalin to time the invasion with Soviet offensives on the Eastern Front, creating a two-front assault that would stretch Germany's forces to their limits. Despite his initial reservations, Churchill fully committed to the success of the operation, understanding that it was essential to liberating Europe and defeating Nazi Germany. Strengthening the alliance through wartime conferences. Throughout the war, Churchill attended a series of high-profile conferences with Roosevelt and Stalin to discuss strategy, resources, and post-war planning. These meetings, held in locations ranging from Tehran to Yalta, were essential to maintaining cohesion among the Allies and ensuring that their efforts were focused on the same goals. Churchill's diplomatic skill, combined with his deep understanding of global politics, made him a vital figure in these discussions, where he often acted as a bridge between Roosevelt's democratic ideals and Stalin's pragmatic, often ruthless approach. The conferences revealed both the strengths and tensions within the alliance. Churchill fought to secure British interests, particularly in the Mediterranean and the Middle East, and he often clashed with Stalin over issues of territory and influence in Eastern Europe. Despite these disagreements, Churchill's ability to negotiate and his personal rapport with Roosevelt helped to keep the alliance intact, ensuring that the Allies could work together to bring about Germany's defeat. The Grand Alliance, a complex but crucial partnership. The partnership between Britain, the United States, and the Soviet Union, often called the Grand Alliance, was a complex and, at times, uneasy alliance. While Roosevelt and Churchill shared a genuine friendship, their relationship with Stalin was marked by mutual suspicion and differing ideological visions for the post-war world. Churchill frequently found himself balancing Roosevelt's optimism with Stalin's demands, striving to keep the alliance united despite the challenges. Churchill's leadership within the Grand Alliance exemplified his pragmatic approach to foreign policy. He was willing to set aside ideological differences and personal grievances for the sake of achieving victory, focusing on the larger goal of defeating Nazi Germany. This ability to adapt, compromise, and build consensus among disparate leaders was one of Churchill's greatest strengths as a wartime leader, enabling him to forge an alliance that would ultimately change the course of history. Through his diplomatic efforts and strategic vision, Churchill succeeded in transforming Britain's fight for survival into a global struggle against fascism, uniting the world's most powerful nations in a common cause. His relationships with Roosevelt and Stalin, though complex and fraught with challenges, became the foundation of the Allied war effort, laying the groundwork for the coordinated campaigns that would eventually bring victory. As the Allies prepared for the decisive invasion of Europe, Churchill's leadership and commitment to the alliance were more crucial than ever. The next chapter will delve into the dramatic events of D-Day and the subsequent liberation of Europe, exploring how Churchill's vision and determination helped bring the Allies to the brink of victory. The stakes were higher than ever, but the alliance Churchill had built was ready to face the ultimate test. Chapter 6: The Battle of Britain. As the Allied forces gathered momentum, the decision to launch a full-scale invasion of Nazi-occupied Europe loomed large. The risks were immense, but the potential for ending the war and liberating Europe from Hitler's grasp outweighed the dangers. Winston Churchill, along with U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt and their military advisors, was at the center of the planning and strategy behind what would become known as D-Day, or Operation Overlord. This chapter explores the meticulous preparations for the invasion, the execution of the operation, and Churchill's role in one of the most pivotal military undertakings in history: the decision for a cross-channel invasion. The idea of a cross-channel invasion to liberate Europe had been on the Allied agenda since the early days of the war, but it required extensive planning and coordination. Churchill, who had initially favored a more gradual approach through the Mediterranean, ultimately agreed that a large-scale invasion of France was necessary to bring about a decisive victory. After the success of the North African and Italian campaigns, the Allied forces had gained valuable combat experience and had begun to push the Axis forces back. However, a direct assault on France was an entirely different endeavor. The proposed invasion posed several challenges. The beaches of Normandy were heavily fortified, and the German defenses, known as the Atlantic Wall, stretched along the entire western coast of Europe. Hitler, fully aware of the Allies' intentions, had deployed experienced soldiers and defensive installations along potential invasion sites. Churchill and the Allied command knew that success would require not only an overwhelming force but also an element of surprise and precise coordination. In January 1944, General Dwight D. Eisenhower was appointed Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force, tasked with leading the invasion. Churchill, Roosevelt, and Eisenhower, along with British Chief of the Imperial General Staff General Alan Brooke and U.S. Army Chief of Staff General George Marshall, worked together to finalize the invasion strategy. Churchill's influence in these planning sessions was significant. He was known for his insistence on thorough preparation and his unyielding belief in the importance of unity and morale. Planning Operation Overlord: The Road to D-Day. The planning of Operation Overlord was a monumental effort that involved tens of thousands of military personnel, engineers, and intelligence experts. The Allies selected 5 beachheads along the Normandy coast, codenamed Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword, as the primary landing sites. Each beachhead presented its own unique challenges, and the Allies devised specific tactics for each, taking into account factors such as terrain, fortifications, and anticipated German resistance. Churchill played a crucial role in shaping the invasion strategy, particularly in terms of logistics and deception. He recognized the importance of misleading the German High Command about the location and timing of the invasion. Operation Bodyguard, a complex deception plan, was designed to convince Hitler that the main assault would take place at Pas de Calais, the narrowest point of the English Channel. This operation included fake radio traffic, dummy landing craft, and even the creation of a phantom army, complete with inflatable tanks and tents, led by the famous U.S. General George Patton. The deception worked brilliantly, causing the Germans to divert significant forces away from Normandy. Meanwhile, Churchill pushed for technological innovation to support the invasion. Under his direction, the British developed specialized landing vehicles known as Hobart's Funnies, designed to overcome beach obstacles and support infantry landings. He also championed the creation of the Mulberry Harbors, portable, temporary harbors that could be assembled on the Normandy coast to facilitate the rapid unloading of troops, vehicles, and supplies. Churchill's foresight and advocacy for these logistical innovations would prove essential to the success of the invasion. The night before, Churchill's resolve and reflection. As D-Day approached, Churchill's anxiety grew. He understood the enormity of the task at hand and the potential consequences of failure. The night before the invasion, he stayed up late, pacing and worrying, fully aware of the lives at risk and the hopes resting on this one monumental operation. He later remarked that he had scarcely felt such an overwhelming burden of responsibility. Churchill was especially concerned about the weather, as a storm had threatened to delay the operation. A last-minute break in the weather provided a narrow window of opportunity, and Eisenhower gave the order to proceed. Despite his nerves, Churchill was determined to show solidarity with the troops. He expressed a desire to cross the Channel with them, planning to watch the landing from aboard a British warship. However, King George VI and Churchill's advisors strongly objected, arguing that his presence on the front lines would endanger the nation's leadership. Reluctantly, Churchill agreed to remain in Britain, but he followed every development closely, anxiously awaiting news of the landing. D-Day, the invasion of Normandy. On the morning of June 6, 1944, the largest amphibious assault in history commenced. Over 156,000 American, British, and Canadian troops landed on the beaches of Normandy under heavy German fire. The invasion was supported by a massive aerial bombardment and naval gunfire, designed to soften German defenses. However, the landings were fraught with challenges. Omaha Beach, in particular, proved to be a bloodbath as U.S. forces encountered fierce resistance from German defenders entrenched in fortified positions. Despite the high casualties and intense combat, the Allied forces managed to secure the beachheads by the end of the day. The success of the landings marked a significant victory, though at a great cost. Churchill received updates throughout the day, and he was deeply moved by the courage of the troops. That evening, he addressed the House of Commons, stating, "So far, the commanders who are engaged report that everything is proceeding according to plan." And what a plan! His pride in the Allied forces and his belief in their mission resonated with a nation that had endured years of hardship. The beachheads established at Normandy allowed the Allies to begin a steady advance into Nazi-occupied France. The success of D-Day was not only a military victory but also a psychological triumph, demonstrating that Hitler's forces were vulnerable and that the liberation of Europe was within reach. Churchill's leadership, along with the meticulous planning and bravery of the Allied forces, had transformed the invasion from a daring gamble into a resounding success. The aftermath of D-Day, the march across France. Following the Normandy landings, the Allies began a relentless push eastward, liberating towns and cities as they advanced. The Normandy campaign was grueling, with Allied forces facing fierce German resistance, particularly in the hedgerows of the French countryside. Churchill stayed closely involved, often meeting with Eisenhower and other Allied leaders to discuss strategy and logistics. His determination to press forward, despite the obstacles, inspired the Allied troops and reinforced the shared commitment to liberating Europe. By late August 1944, Paris was liberated, a moment that symbolized both the triumph of the Allied forces and the resilience of the French resistance. Churchill's vision of a united Allied advance was coming to fruition, with British, American, and French forces working together to reclaim Europe. As they pushed further into German-held territory, Churchill's strategic mind turned toward the future, recognizing that the defeat of Nazi Germany was now within sight. Churchill and the Allied unity. The success of the Normandy invasion and the Allied march across France underscored the strength of the coalition Churchill had helped to build. Despite the cultural and political differences among the Allied nations, Churchill's emphasis on unity and collaboration held them together. His relationship with Roosevelt was particularly crucial during this time, as they maintained regular communication and shared a vision of post-war Europe based on peace and cooperation. Churchill's influence in fostering this unity was a testament to his diplomatic skill and his unshakable belief in the importance of international solidarity. The liberation of France also strengthened Churchill's bond with Charles de Gaulle, the leader of the Free French forces. Their relationship had been contentious at times, as de Gaulle was fiercely protective of French sovereignty and often clashed with Churchill and Roosevelt. However, Churchill recognized de Gaulle's value as a symbol of French resistance and a unifying figure for the French people. By supporting de Gaulle's leadership, Churchill helped lay the groundwork for a stable, independent France that would stand as a partner in the post-war order. The strategic lessons of D-Day. Operation Overlord provided Churchill with valuable insights into the nature of modern warfare. The scale and complexity of the invasion underscored the importance of coordination, technological innovation, and meticulous planning. Churchill's emphasis on deception, logistics, and the use of specialized equipment proved decisive, showcasing his ability to adapt to the demands of a rapidly evolving battlefield. His role in the planning and execution of D-Day demonstrated his capacity to think both strategically and practically, qualities that were essential to the Allied victory. D-Day also reinforced Churchill's belief in the power of collective action. The invasion was a collaborative effort involving not only the British and Americans but also Canadian, French, Polish, and other Allied forces. The unity of purpose that Churchill had championed throughout the war was fully realized on the beaches of Normandy, where soldiers from diverse backgrounds fought side by side for a common goal. This spirit of cooperation would remain a cornerstone of Churchill's vision for the post-war world. The success of D-Day was a turning point in World War II, marking the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. Through meticulous planning, strategic vision, and the courage of the Allied forces, the invasion of Normandy shattered Hitler's grip on Western Europe and paved the way for the liberation of the continent. Churchill's role in orchestrating this historic operation highlighted his leadership, resilience, and unwavering commitment to victory. Chapter 7: The Road to Victory. With the success of D-Day and the Allied forces advancing across Western Europe, the defeat of Nazi Germany seemed not only possible but inevitable. Yet, the final phase of the war presented new challenges. Winston Churchill, though hopeful, remained vigilant as the Allies pressed toward Berlin. The path to victory required careful strategy, complex coordination with the Allies, and decisions that would impact the post-war order. This chapter examines Churchill's role in the final Allied campaigns, the fall of Nazi Germany, and the crucial decisions that would shape both the end of the war and the future of Europe. The Allied push across Western Europe. After the Normandy landings, the Allies faced the daunting task of liberating the rest of France and advancing toward Germany. In the months following D-Day, Allied forces made steady progress, despite encountering fierce resistance from German troops entrenched in fortified positions. Churchill closely monitored the campaign, maintaining frequent communication with Allied commanders. He also kept the British public informed, aware that sustaining morale at home was essential to maintaining support for the war effort. The liberation of Paris in August 1944 marked a significant milestone. Churchill saw this victory as a symbol of the Allied resolve and a reminder of what was at stake. He and Charles de Gaulle, the leader of the Free French forces, marched triumphantly through the streets of the French capital, a gesture that underscored the shared commitment to liberating Europe from tyranny. Churchill's complex relationship with de Gaulle, marked by both friction and mutual respect, reached a new level of solidarity during the liberation of France. However, as Allied forces moved closer to Germany, the challenges grew. The Germans mounted a desperate counterattack in the winter of 1944, launching the Battle of the Bulge in the Ardennes. This surprise offensive tested the resolve of the Allied forces, as German troops broke through Allied lines and threatened to stall the advance. Churchill, deeply concerned, worked tirelessly to ensure that reinforcements and supplies reached the front. The resilience of the Allied soldiers, combined with coordinated counterattacks, eventually repelled the German advance, turning the tide once again in favor of the Allies. The Battle of the Bulge was Germany's last major offensive on the Western Front. Its failure marked a significant blow to German forces, weakening their ability to defend the homeland. Churchill knew that the end of the war was drawing near, but he remained cautious, urging Allied commanders to avoid complacency and to press forward with full force. His priority was clear: to ensure that Nazi Germany was completely defeated with no chance of resurgence. The Yalta Conference, shaping the post-war world. As the Allies moved closer to Berlin, Churchill joined Roosevelt and Stalin at the Yalta Conference in February 1945. The conference, held in the Soviet Union, was intended to coordinate the final phase of the war and begin discussions about the future of Europe. The three leaders, often referred to as the Big Three, each had distinct visions for the post-war order, and balancing their interests required delicate diplomacy. Churchill's goals at Yalta reflected his desire to protect British interests while securing a stable, democratic Europe. He was deeply concerned about the spread of Soviet influence in Eastern Europe, where Stalin had already established a foothold. Churchill believed that nations liberated from Nazi occupation should have the right to self-determination and democratic governance. However, Stalin, focused on securing Soviet borders and establishing a sphere of influence, resisted these ideas, favoring regimes that would align with Soviet interests. One of the most significant outcomes of the Yalta Conference was the agreement to divide Germany into occupation zones, with each Allied power controlling a specific area. Berlin, the German capital, would also be divided, a decision that foreshadowed the division of Europe in the Cold War. Churchill reluctantly accepted these terms, recognizing the need to maintain unity among the Allies. He understood that cooperation with the Soviet Union was essential to securing Germany's surrender, even though he harbored deep mistrust of Stalin's intentions. The conference also laid the groundwork for the creation of the United Nations, an organization that Churchill and Roosevelt hoped would prevent future conflicts and promote international cooperation. Churchill, a staunch advocate for a united Europe, believed that the United Nations could be a forum for resolving disputes and protecting smaller nations from aggression. Despite his reservations about Soviet intentions, he agreed to support the organization, hoping that it would serve as a foundation for a more peaceful world. The race to Berlin and the fall of Nazi Germany. As spring approached, the Allied forces advanced rapidly toward Germany from the west, while Soviet troops closed in from the east. Churchill was keenly aware of the strategic importance of Berlin, both as the capital of Nazi Germany and as a symbolic prize. However, he also recognized that the Soviet Union, given its massive losses and crucial role in the Eastern Front, would likely be the first to enter the city. While Churchill advocated for a coordinated Allied approach to Berlin, Roosevelt and the American military leadership decided not to divert resources for a race to the capital, focusing instead on a broader occupation strategy. In April 1945, Soviet forces entered Berlin, and fierce street battles ensued. On April 30th, Hitler committed suicide in his bunker, effectively signaling the collapse of the Nazi regime. By early May, German forces began to surrender across Europe. Churchill, who had spent years rallying his nation to resist and endure, now prepared to announce the long-awaited victory. On May 8, 1945, Victory in Europe Day, or V-Day, Churchill addressed the British people in a broadcast that captured the relief and joy of a nation that had withstood the full might of the Nazi war machine. Standing before cheering crowds, Churchill declared, "We may allow ourselves a brief period of rejoicing, but let us not forget for a moment the toils and efforts that lie ahead." Even in this moment of triumph, he reminded his countrymen that the war against Japan continued, and that the task of rebuilding Europe would be immense. The challenges of peace and reconstruction. For Churchill, the victory over Nazi Germany was bittersweet. The end of the war in Europe marked the fulfillment of his vision, but it also presented new challenges. Britain emerged from the war exhausted and financially strained, with a weakened empire and an uncertain future. Churchill was acutely aware that the geopolitical landscape had shifted, and he feared that the Soviet Union's influence in Eastern Europe would create instability and hinder the prospects for peace. The conclusion of the war also signaled the need for a transition from military to civilian governance. Churchill, who had proven himself as a wartime leader, now faced the challenge of guiding Britain through the complexities of peacetime. He was committed to rebuilding Britain and restoring the economy, yet he understood that the sacrifices of the war would continue to shape the nation's future. Churchill's vision for a post-war Europe. In the months following the end of the war, Churchill became a vocal advocate for European unity. He believed that the horrors of the war underscored the need for nations to work together to prevent future conflicts. His famous Iron Curtain speech in 1946 would later articulate his concerns about Soviet expansionism and the ideological divide between Eastern and Western Europe. However, even before that speech, Churchill was already thinking about the future of Europe and Britain's role within it. Churchill envisioned a Europe united by shared values of democracy and freedom. He argued that economic cooperation, mutual security agreements, and cultural exchange would help prevent the rise of totalitarian regimes. While he supported Britain's global influence, he also saw the importance of establishing alliances with other European nations, foreseeing the potential for a United States of Europe. This vision laid the groundwork for the European integration movement, which would eventually lead to the creation of the European Union. The Potsdam Conference and growing tensions. In July 1945, Churchill attended the Potsdam Conference, where he met with U.S. President Harry S. Truman and Stalin to discuss the administration of post-war Germany and the future of Europe. The atmosphere at Potsdam was markedly different from that of earlier conferences. Roosevelt had passed away, and Truman, though supportive of the Allied cause, took a firmer stance against Soviet expansion. Churchill, while eager to maintain cooperation, found his concerns about Soviet intentions growing. The conference resulted in agreements on Germany's disarmament, the prosecution of war criminals, and reparations, but tensions between the Western Allies and the Soviet Union were palpable. Churchill and Truman shared concerns about Stalin's influence in Eastern Europe, where communist governments were beginning to take hold. While Churchill remained committed to Allied unity, he feared that the ideological divide between East and West would lead to future conflicts, a concern that would soon be realized in the Cold War. The British general election and Churchill's shocking defeat. Just as Churchill was preparing to navigate the complexities of post-war Europe, he faced a surprising turn of events at home. In July 1945, Britain held its first general election since the beginning of the war. Despite his popularity as a wartime leader, Churchill and the Conservative Party were defeated by the Labour Party, led by Clement Attlee. The result was a shock to Churchill, who had dedicated himself to leading Britain through its darkest hours. The Labour Party's victory reflected the British public's desire for social change and economic reform after years of hardship. Attlee's platform promised a focus on rebuilding the economy, expanding social welfare, and addressing the needs of ordinary citizens. Churchill, while respected for his leadership during the war, was seen by some as less attuned to the domestic issues facing Britain. The election marked the end of Churchill's tenure as Prime Minister, though he would remain active in politics and return to the office in 1951. The road to victory was a complex journey marked by sacrifice, resilience, and decisive leadership. Churchill's role in guiding Britain and the Allies to defeat Nazi Germany demonstrated his strategic insight, diplomatic skill, and unyielding commitment to freedom. His influence in shaping the final campaigns and securing the post-war order laid the foundation for a new Europe, even as the ideological tensions of the Cold War began to emerge. Chapter 8. The Road to Victory. With the conclusion of World War II in Europe, Winston Churchill's focus shifted to the daunting task of securing a stable, peaceful future for a world fractured by years of conflict. Although the defeat of Nazi Germany marked a triumphant end to one of history's most devastating wars, Churchill recognized that victory brought with it an array of new challenges. Europe lay in ruins, and the wartime alliance between the Western powers and the Soviet Union had begun to show cracks, with tensions between East and West foreshadowing the Cold War. Churchill, undeterred by his loss in the British general election of 1945, emerged as a voice of caution and wisdom in the post-war landscape, advocating for unity, rebuilding, and vigilance against new threats to freedom. This chapter delves into Churchill's vision for post-war Europe, his famous Iron Curtain speech, and his role as an advocate for peace, democracy, and international cooperation. Though no longer Prime Minister, Churchill's influence remains significant, and his post-war legacy as a statesman would shape the direction of both Britain and the world. Churchill's vision for rebuilding Europe. As Europe emerged from the devastation of World War II, Churchill emphasized the need for collective efforts to rebuild the continent. He was particularly focused on ensuring that the liberated nations could achieve stability and prosperity, free from authoritarianism. Churchill's belief in the power of unity had deepened during the war, and he now saw cooperation between nations as essential for a peaceful future. He envisioned a Europe where countries would work together economically, politically, and militarily to prevent the rise of any new totalitarian regimes. In a series of speeches and writings, Churchill began advocating for what he termed a United States of Europe. He recognized that individual European nations weakened by years of war would struggle to recover on their own. Instead, he proposed that they join forces, pooling resources and creating a framework for mutual security. This vision was the foundation for what would eventually become the European Union, though Churchill did not foresee Britain's active participation in such an organization. His primary concern was the establishment of a stable and cooperative Europe that could serve as a buffer against Soviet influence and ensure lasting peace. Churchill's proposal for a united Europe was radical for its time, especially given the historical rivalries between nations like France and Germany. However, he believed that the shared experiences of war and the common goal of recovery would allow these former adversaries to come together. Churchill's call for unity was rooted not only in pragmatism but also in his idealism. He believed that Europe could, and should, move beyond centuries of conflict to forge a peaceful and prosperous future. The Iron Curtain speech, a warning to the world. One of Churchill's most influential contributions to post-war diplomacy was his 1946 Iron Curtain speech, delivered at Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri. Officially titled The Sinews of Peace, the speech marked a turning point in global politics by highlighting the growing ideological divide between the Western democracies and the Soviet Union. Invited by U.S. President Harry S. Truman, who shared Churchill's concerns, the speech reflected Churchill's alarm at the expansion of Soviet influence in Eastern Europe and the spread of communist regimes. Churchill's words were stark. From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent. He warned that the Soviet Union was establishing a sphere of influence that threatened the freedom and independence of Eastern European nations. Churchill's characterization of that Iron Curtain quickly became a defining symbol of the Cold War, encapsulating the ideological divide that would shape global politics for decades to come. This speech was controversial, as it signaled a clear shift from the wartime alliance to a recognition of the Soviet Union as a potential adversary. Many Western leaders feared that Churchill's words might provoke further Soviet aggression. However, Churchill was unapologetic, believing it was his duty to speak the truth and to urge Western nations to remain vigilant. He emphasized that while he hoped for peaceful relations with the Soviet Union, the West must be prepared to stand firm in defense of freedom. His speech catalyzed a wave of anti-communist sentiment in the West and laid the groundwork for policies of containment that would characterize Western foreign policy throughout the Cold War. The Marshall Plan and economic recovery. Churchill strongly supported initiatives aimed at rebuilding war-torn Europe, recognizing that economic stability was essential for lasting peace. In 1947, the United States launched the Marshall Plan, an ambitious program of financial aid to assist European nations in their recovery efforts. Although Churchill was no longer Prime Minister, he remained a vocal advocate for the Marshall Plan, which he saw as a powerful tool to counter Soviet influence by promoting economic strength and resilience in Western Europe. The Marshall Plan provided billions of dollars in aid to European countries, funding the reconstruction of infrastructure, the revitalization of industries, and the modernization of agriculture. Churchill believed that the program would help secure peace by addressing the economic hardships that often fueled political instability and extremism. He viewed the Marshall Plan not only as an act of generosity but also as a strategic move to strengthen the Western alliance. By supporting Europe's recovery, the United States and its allies could build a unified front against Soviet expansionism. Churchill's advocacy for economic recovery was rooted in his belief that prosperity was essential to political stability. He argued that strong economies would enable European nations to resist the appeal of communism and to establish democratic institutions that would protect individual freedoms. The Marshall Plan, in Churchill's view, was a testament to the values of solidarity and cooperation that he had championed throughout his career. Rebuilding Britain, Churchill's domestic legacy. Although Churchill's vision for post-war Europe was grand, he also faced the practical realities of rebuilding Britain, which had suffered enormous economic losses during the war. The British people, exhausted and financially strained, demanded social reform and an end to austerity. Churchill, while a committed advocate for Britain's recovery, struggled with the balance between his vision of a powerful Britain and the need for domestic changes that would improve the lives of ordinary citizens. The Labour government under Clement Attlee, which had won the 1945 election, implemented a series of transformative social programs, including the establishment of the National Health Service, NHS, and a comprehensive welfare system. Churchill, though he respected Attlee's vision for social reform, had mixed feelings about the extent of these changes. He feared that large-scale state intervention in the economy might undermine Britain's entrepreneurial spirit and strain the nation's finances. However, he acknowledged that the sacrifices of war demanded recognition and support for veterans and civilians alike. Despite his reservations, Churchill's legacy as a leader who valued both individual freedom and social responsibility influenced the post-war reforms that shaped modern Britain. His commitment to the British people's welfare, even as he advocated for global leadership, left a lasting impact on the nation. Although he did not directly implement these reforms, his leadership during the war had laid the groundwork for a Britain willing to embrace change and address the needs of its citizens. Churchill's return as Prime Minister and the emerging Cold War. In 1951, 6 years after his defeat, Churchill returned to the office of Prime Minister. Although now in his late 70s, he remained deeply committed to the challenges of a changing world. His second term was marked by his efforts to navigate the complex dynamics of the Cold War, balance Britain's role in a rapidly decolonizing world, and strengthen the Anglo-American relationship that he viewed as vital to Western security. Churchill continued to advocate for a strong, united Europe, often meeting with European leaders to discuss the importance of unity in the face of Soviet expansion. He remained a passionate supporter of NATO, believing that a military alliance among Western nations was essential for maintaining peace. However, he also sought ways to reduce tensions with the Soviet Union, exploring opportunities for diplomacy and negotiation. Churchill's efforts to engage with the Soviet leadership reflected his understanding that, while ideological differences were profound, avoiding another global conflict was paramount. Churchill's second term was not without challenges. Britain's influence on the global stage had diminished, and the empire that had once been the source of British power was now largely dissolved. Churchill grappled with the reality of Britain's changing role, working to preserve the nation's dignity and influence even as it became clear that the United States and the Soviet Union were now the world's superpowers. His leadership during this period reflected a blend of pragmatism and idealism, as he sought to ensure that Britain remained a respected voice in global affairs. Churchill's final legacy and the pursuit of peace. Winston Churchill retired from political life in 1955, leaving behind a legacy that extended far beyond his years as Prime Minister. He had led Britain through its darkest hours, inspiring a nation to resist tyranny and persevere against overwhelming odds. His speeches, marked by eloquence and conviction, became symbols of hope and courage, embodying the spirit of a people who refused to yield. Churchill's legacy as a wartime leader was unmatched, but his contributions to the post-war world were equally significant. In his later years, Churchill continued to write and speak about the importance of peace, unity, and vigilance against threats to freedom. He was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1953 for his historical writings, a testament to his skill as a writer and his ability to capture the essence of the human experience in the face of adversity. Churchill's reflections on war, leadership, and resilience offered valuable insights for future generations, reminding them of the sacrifices made to secure a free world. Churchill's vision of a united Europe and his warnings about the dangers of authoritarianism remain relevant to this day. His influence can be seen in the institutions he helped shape, from the United Nations to NATO, and in the ideals of democracy and cooperation that he championed. Churchill's belief in the strength of alliances, his understanding of the complexities of peace, and his commitment to a world based on mutual respect and shared values serve as guiding principles for leaders around the world. The post-war period was a time of transition and uncertainty, yet Churchill's leadership, vision, and resilience continued to guide Britain and the Western world through these challenges. His role in shaping the future of Europe, advocating for unity, and cautioning against the dangers of ideological division left an indelible mark on the modern era. Though he would never again lead Britain through war, Churchill's legacy as a statesman endured, reminding the world of the power of courage, conviction, and collaboration. Chapter 9. Churchill's Legacy. Winston Churchill's life was one of unparalleled dedication to his country and to the principles of freedom, resilience, and unity. His career spanned more than 6 decades, encompassing both remarkable achievements and profound challenges. Even after the guns of World War II had fallen silent, Churchill remained an active and influential figure on the global stage, his insights into leadership, diplomacy, and the value of perseverance continuing to resonate. This chapter examines Churchill's lasting legacy, exploring the lessons his life and career offer to future generations, and assessing his impact on modern history, politics, and the ideals of democracy and international cooperation. Churchill as a symbol of resilience and leadership. Winston Churchill's story is often framed as one of resilience, the story of a man who, despite setbacks and criticisms, never lost sight of his purpose. From his early days in Parliament, through the trenches of World War I, to his leadership during Britain's darkest hours in World War II, Churchill exhibited an unbreakable spirit that inspired his countrymen and earned him a place in history. His ability to maintain a steady course, even when facing near-impossible odds, made him a symbol of courage and determination. One of Churchill's defining characteristics as a leader was his ability to inspire through words. His speeches, whether delivered in the House of Commons or broadcast over the airwaves, gave hope to millions. He used language to paint vivid pictures of both the dangers Britain faced and the strength he believed lay within his people. His words, such as "We shall fight on the beaches" and "Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few," became rallying cries that helped Britain endure the relentless bombing of the Blitz and stand resolute against Nazi tyranny. Churchill's resilience was not limited to wartime. He faced repeated political setbacks, including his controversial decision to switch from the Conservative to the Liberal Party and his demotion after the failed Gallipoli campaign in World War I. Even after losing the general election in 1945, Churchill continued to advocate for what he believed in. He understood that leadership was not about unbroken success but about the courage to persevere. This quality of resilience became a central theme in his legacy, inspiring leaders worldwide to remain steadfast in the face of adversity. The legacy of the Iron Curtain and the Cold War. Churchill's Iron Curtain speech in 1946 was a landmark moment in the early years of the Cold War, setting the stage for decades of geopolitical tension. His warning about the spread of Soviet influence proved prescient, as Eastern Europe fell under communist control and the ideological divide between East and West deepened. Churchill's call for unity among Western nations and his advocacy for a strong, organized alliance against authoritarianism laid the groundwork for NATO and the strategic policies of containment that would define Western foreign policy throughout the Cold War. Churchill's insights into the complexities of international relations and his understanding of the importance of alliances continue to influence foreign policy today. The Iron Curtain speech is often cited as a foundational document in the history of the Cold War, encapsulating the challenges of ideological conflict and the need for vigilance against threats to freedom. Churchill's legacy as a statesman who could foresee the dangers of unchecked totalitarianism has made his words a touchstone for policymakers confronting new challenges in international diplomacy and defense. Churchill's vision for a united Europe. One of Churchill's less well-known but equally important contributions was his vision of a united Europe. His call for a United States of Europe was groundbreaking in a continent historically divided by conflict and rivalry. Although he did not envision Britain's full integration into such an organization, Churchill believed that closer ties between European nations could prevent the kind of destructive wars that had ravaged the continent in the first half of the 20th century. His vision for a unified Europe ultimately laid the intellectual foundation for what would become the European Union, fostering peace and economic cooperation across borders. Churchill's advocacy for European unity was rooted in his understanding of the dangers of isolationism and his desire to promote stability and prosperity. He saw economic cooperation as essential for peace, and his support for institutions that encouraged cross-border collaboration reflected his commitment to a vision of Europe built on shared values. Although Churchill's relationship with European integration was complex, he saw Britain as a global power with strong ties to the Commonwealth and the United States. His contributions to the concept of European unity remain significant. Today, the European Union stands as a testament to the ideals of cooperation, peace, and resilience that Churchill championed. Lessons in leadership, strength, integrity, and vision. Churchill's legacy as a leader offers valuable lessons for future generations. His leadership style was characterized by a rare combination of strength, integrity, and vision. He was a leader who inspired trust and commanded respect, not by avoiding difficult truths but by addressing them directly and offering hope. Churchill understood that a leader's duty was to articulate a clear vision and to inspire others to rise above their fears and challenges. Churchill's integrity was reflected in his unwavering commitment to the principles he believed in, even when they were unpopular. He was willing to stand alone in his warnings about the dangers of Nazi Germany, facing ridicule and isolation rather than compromising his beliefs. This courage to speak the truth, regardless of the personal cost, made him a leader of unparalleled conviction. His life teaches the importance of standing firm in one's values, even in the face of opposition, a lesson that resonates in an era where political courage is often in short supply. Moreover, Churchill's vision extended beyond the immediate concerns of his time. He saw the need for strong international institutions to maintain peace, a lesson that continues to shape modern diplomacy. His support for the United Nations and his advocacy for collective security alliances like NATO demonstrated his understanding that the challenges of the modern world required cooperation and collaboration among nations. Churchill's commitment to a vision of global peace, based on mutual respect and shared values, remains a powerful ideal. The cultural and historical impact of Churchill's legacy. Winston Churchill's influence extends beyond politics and international relations. He has become a cultural icon, celebrated in literature, art, and popular media. His life story has been portrayed in countless books, films, and documentaries, cementing his place in the popular imagination as one of history's great leaders. Churchill's resilience, eloquence, and courage continue to inspire people from all walks of life, making him a symbol of what can be achieved through perseverance and determination. Churchill's writings, which earned him the Nobel Prize in Literature, offer a window into his worldview, his understanding of history, and his reflections on leadership and human nature. His volumes on the history of World War II remain widely read and respected, providing not only a detailed account of the events of the war but also insights into the mind of a man who played a central role in shaping those events. Churchill's literary legacy, like his political legacy, has influenced generations, encouraging readers to consider the complexities of war, peace, and the human spirit. The enduring relevance of Churchill's ideas. Today, Winston Churchill's ideas remain relevant as the world faces new challenges in the form of political extremism, threats to democracy, and the complexities of international diplomacy. Churchill's belief in the power of alliances, his understanding of the importance of resilience, and his commitment to freedom serve as enduring principles for leaders navigating a rapidly changing global landscape. In an era where the rise of authoritarianism once again threatens the values of democracy, Churchill's life offers a reminder of the importance of vigilance and the courage to defend those values. His speeches, which continue to be quoted and studied, underscore the necessity of moral clarity in times of crisis. Churchill's legacy is a call to leaders everywhere to uphold the principles of freedom and justice, even in the face of daunting challenges. Winston Churchill's legacy is one of remarkable vision, strength, and moral conviction. His life and career, marked by both triumph and hardship, offer valuable lessons on the power of resilience, the importance of integrity, and the role of leadership in shaping history. As a wartime leader, Churchill inspired a nation and the world to resist tyranny and to stand united against oppression. As a statesman, he advocated for peace, unity, and cooperation, laying the foundations for the alliances and institutions that continue to safeguard democracy today. Churchill's legacy is not confined to the pages of history. His principles and ideas remain a guiding light for those who believe in the power of human courage, the necessity of unity, and the strength of democratic values. His life reminds us that, even in the darkest of times, a leader with vision, courage, and conviction can change the course of history. Chapter 10. Lessons from Churchill's Life and Legacy. As one of history's most remarkable leaders, Winston Churchill left behind a legacy rich with lessons that continue to resonate in contemporary society. His life, marked by resilience, bravery, and a profound commitment to democracy and freedom, offers enduring insights into leadership, the preservation of human dignity, and the defense of shared values. This chapter distills the key lessons from Churchill's life, examining their relevance in today's world and their influence on leaders and societies grappling with the complexities of the modern age. The power of resilience and perseverance. One of the most enduring lessons from Churchill's life is the value of resilience. His career was characterized by moments of extraordinary success and humbling setbacks. From his early struggles in school to his controversial role in the Gallipoli campaign during World War I, Churchill faced both triumph and defeat. Yet he never allowed failure to define him. Instead, he viewed each challenge as an opportunity to learn and grow stronger, embodying the principle that true leadership is not about unbroken success but about the courage to continue in the face of adversity. Churchill's resilience was most evident during the darkest days of World War II, when Britain stood alone against Nazi Germany. As Prime Minister, he refused to consider surrender, inspiring his countrymen with his determination and unbreakable spirit. His speeches, full of passion and conviction, rallied the British people to persevere. Churchill's legacy teaches us that resilience is essential not only in wartime but also in everyday life. In an era marked by rapid change and uncertainty, his example reminds us that setbacks are part of the journey and that perseverance is a defining trait of true leadership. The importance of vision and strategic thinking. Churchill's success as a leader was due in large part to his ability to see beyond immediate concerns and envision a broader future. He understood the importance of strategic thinking and planning, both in military campaigns and in diplomacy. During the 1930s, he was one of the few voices in Parliament warning about the rise of Nazi Germany and the threat it posed to Europe. Though initially dismissed as an alarmist, Churchill's foresight proved accurate, highlighting the necessity of long-term vision. In wartime, Churchill demonstrated an exceptional grasp of strategy, balancing military operations with diplomatic efforts to strengthen alliances. His push for technological innovation and his willingness to engage in complex logistical planning were instrumental in Britain's defense. Today, his strategic acumen is studied by military leaders and policymakers worldwide, offering valuable lessons on the importance of preparation, adaptability, and clear objectives. Churchill's life underscores the value of vision in leadership, emphasizing that leaders must be willing to confront uncomfortable truths and prepare for the future with a sense of purpose and direction. Integrity and moral conviction. A defining characteristic of Churchill's leadership was his commitment to integrity and moral conviction. He believed that a leader's responsibility was to tell the truth even when it was difficult or unpopular. During the early years of World War II, he was unflinchingly honest with the British public about the severity of the threat they faced, refusing to offer false hope or sugarcoat the realities of war. His honesty earned him the trust of his people, reinforcing the idea that integrity is foundational to effective leadership. Churchill's moral clarity extended to his views on totalitarianism and human rights. He saw the fight against Nazi Germany as a defense of fundamental freedoms and human dignity, values he believed were essential to the survival of civilized society. His willingness to stand up for these principles, even when it meant facing isolation or criticism, set a powerful example. In a world where moral ambiguity often clouds decision-making, Churchill's commitment to integrity reminds us that true leadership requires a steadfast dedication to ethical principles, regardless of the cost. The art of communication. Churchill's ability to communicate effectively was one of his most significant assets as a leader. His speeches, which blended eloquence with emotional depth, are among the most famous in history, inspiring millions and rallying his country to withstand the onslaught of war. Churchill understood that leadership was not only about making decisions but also about conveying a sense of purpose and unity. He used language to foster resilience, instill hope, and strengthen national identity, recognizing that words could be as powerful as actions. Churchill's speeches, such as his addresses to Parliament during the Battle of Britain and his Iron Curtain speech in the early years of the Cold War, exemplified his mastery of communication. His words resonated with people across social and political divides, reminding them of the shared values that bound them together. Today, Churchill's speeches continue to be studied by leaders and public speakers, demonstrating the impact of clear, passionate, and purposeful communication. His legacy reminds us that words can inspire action, shape public perception, and build unity in the face of challenges. The need for international cooperation. Churchill's career was defined by his commitment to building alliances and fostering international cooperation. He understood that Britain's survival in World War II depended not only on its own strength but also on the support of allies. His relationship with U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt and Soviet leader Joseph Stalin reflected his belief in the importance of partnerships, even among nations with differing ideologies. The Allied victory was, in large part, a testament to Churchill's ability to bring together a coalition of countries united by a common purpose. In the post-war years, Churchill continued to advocate for international cooperation, supporting the formation of the United Nations and NATO as means to promote peace and security. His vision for a United States of Europe demonstrated his belief in the power of unity to prevent future conflicts. Churchill's legacy reminds us that, in an interconnected world, cooperation is essential for addressing global challenges. His life serves as a powerful example of how alliances based on mutual respect and shared values can create a foundation for peace and stability. Adapting to change and embracing innovation. Churchill's embrace of technological innovation and adaptability was a key factor in his effectiveness as a wartime leader. He recognized the importance of modernizing Britain's defenses and pushed for the development of radar, aircraft production, and other technologies that proved crucial in the Battle of Britain. Churchill's willingness to adopt new methods, such as his support for specialized landing vehicles during the D-Day invasion, highlighted his belief that innovation was essential for success. Churchill's legacy teaches us that leaders must be willing to adapt and embrace new ideas to meet changing circumstances. In today's fast-paced world, where technology evolves rapidly and challenges are increasingly complex, Churchill's example encourages leaders to remain open to innovation and to seek creative solutions. His life underscores the importance of balancing tradition with forward-thinking, recognizing that adaptability is a cornerstone of resilience. The enduring influence of Churchill's legacy. Winston Churchill's impact on history and leadership endures, influencing both policymakers and ordinary people around the world. His life and legacy are celebrated not only in Britain but globally, symbolizing the values of courage, resilience, and integrity. Churchill's belief in the fundamental dignity of human beings, his commitment to defending freedom, and his unyielding spirit in the face of adversity have made him a figure of inspiration for generations. Churchill's contributions to literature, his insights into diplomacy and military strategy, and his role in shaping modern institutions like NATO and the European Union continue to resonate. His life serves as a reminder that even in times of great uncertainty, a leader with vision, courage, and moral conviction can guide a nation toward hope and triumph. Churchill's legacy is a testament to the power of individual action, the importance of democratic values, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Winston Churchill's life offers timeless lessons in leadership, resilience, and the pursuit of peace. His legacy is one of inspiration, reminding us that even in the most challenging circumstances, we have the power to make a difference. As we reflect on Churchill's impact, we see a leader who stood firm in his convictions, who spoke the truth, and who dedicated his life to defending freedom and democracy. His journey, marked by both victory and hardship, serves as a guide for future generations, encouraging them to lead with courage, integrity, and a commitment to the common good. In honoring Churchill's legacy, we remember not only his achievements but also his humanity, his wisdom, and his unwavering belief in the potential of people to overcome even the darkest of times. His story is a call to action, urging us to rise to the challenges of our own era with the same dedication, resilience, and hope that defined his life. Conclusion: the final reflections, Churchill's enduring impact on modern society. As we reach the conclusion of our journey through Winston Churchill's life and legacy, it becomes clear that his influence extends far beyond his role as a wartime leader. Churchill's principles, ideas, and spirit have become woven into the fabric of modern society, impacting political thought, public discourse, and the values of freedom and democracy that guide contemporary global affairs. This chapter reflects on Churchill's lasting impact on modern society, examining the ways in which his life continues to inspire individuals, shape leadership principles, and guide nations through challenges reminiscent of the trials he faced. Churchill's influence on modern leadership. Churchill's model of leadership, defined by resilience, honesty, and a commitment to principle, remains relevant and respected in modern times. Leaders across political, business, and social sectors study Churchill's life and speeches as models of how to communicate effectively, inspire confidence, and navigate crises. His example demonstrates that true leadership requires not only tactical skill but also an unwavering moral compass. Churchill's impact on modern leadership is particularly evident in his ability to connect with people across divides. His emphasis on speaking directly to the public, his use of clear and powerful language, and his unwavering honesty made him a trusted figure. Today's leaders face a similar need to connect authentically with their constituents, inspiring trust and unity. As public expectations of leadership evolve, Churchill's example encourages modern leaders to remain genuine, resilient, and committed to their core values, regardless of shifting political landscapes. A lasting commitment to freedom and human rights. Churchill's dedication to freedom and human rights has left an indelible mark on modern society. He was deeply moved by the plight of those living under oppressive regimes, and his advocacy for democracy and individual liberty continues to resonate. His writings, speeches, and actions underscored his belief that every individual deserves dignity, respect, and the freedom to shape their own future. This commitment to human rights has inspired movements worldwide, reminding people of their inherent right to freedom from tyranny. The influence of Churchill's dedication to these values can be seen in the global expansion of human rights frameworks, particularly in the development of international institutions like the United Nations. His belief that nations must act as protectors of freedom has shaped the ethical responsibilities of modern democracies. Churchill's stance has provided a moral foundation for human rights campaigns around the world, offering a powerful voice of support for those who strive to defend individual freedoms and dignity. The lasting importance of alliances and global cooperation. One of Churchill's greatest achievements was his ability to build and sustain alliances during World War II, a feat that remains relevant in today's interconnected world. His understanding of the value of international partnerships led to the formation of the Allied powers, whose coordinated efforts were instrumental in defeating Nazi Germany. Churchill's commitment to alliances, even with ideologically different nations, showed the importance of collaboration in addressing global challenges. This belief in the strength of alliances laid the groundwork for post-war institutions like NATO and the United Nations. These organizations, inspired in part by Churchill's vision, continue to play a significant role in promoting global peace and security. The importance Churchill placed on international cooperation is particularly relevant in today's world, where global issues such as climate change, economic inequality, and cybersecurity require unified efforts. His legacy reminds us that the most formidable challenges cannot be overcome by any one nation alone, and that collective action, based on mutual respect and shared goals, remains essential for progress. Lessons in the balance of strength and diplomacy. Churchill's approach to diplomacy, firm yet open to dialogue, serves as a model for navigating the complexities of international relations. He understood that while military strength was necessary to confront aggression, diplomacy was equally vital for creating lasting peace. His relationships with Franklin D. Roosevelt and Joseph Stalin reflected his ability to maintain strong alliances through a balance of strength, respect, and pragmatic negotiation. Modern diplomacy often draws on Churchill's legacy, particularly his insistence on maintaining open communication channels even with adversaries. Churchill demonstrated that diplomacy was not a sign of weakness but a powerful tool for achieving strategic objectives. In an age of polarized politics and geopolitical tension, his legacy serves as a reminder that diplomacy, backed by integrity and resolve, can pave the way for resolution and mutual understanding. Inspiring the individual, Churchill's legacy of courage. Churchill's life is also a powerful personal example of courage, determination, and self-belief. His journey from a young officer and war correspondent to a globally recognized leader shows that success is not defined by an unbroken path but by resilience and persistence. His tenacity in the face of adversity has inspired generations to embrace challenges with confidence and to continue striving, regardless of the obstacles. The personal courage Churchill displayed throughout his life speaks to the potential within each individual to make a difference. His journey reminds us that greatness is often achieved not by avoiding hardship but by rising to meet it. Today, his story motivates people from all walks of life to pursue their goals, to learn from failure, and to stand firm in their convictions. His example encourages each of us to realize that courage, perseverance, and faith in one's purpose can overcome even the most daunting challenges. The legacy of hope and unity in times of crisis. Churchill's impact on modern society is perhaps most deeply felt in times of crisis. His ability to inspire hope and resilience in the face of overwhelming odds has made him a symbol of unity and strength. His speeches, filled with hope, honesty, and encouragement, gave people the will to endure and the confidence to overcome fear. This legacy of hope continues to resonate, providing a powerful example of how leadership, grounded in empathy and belief in the human spirit, can guide societies through their darkest moments. In the face of contemporary challenges, from global pandemics to economic crises, Churchill's legacy reminds us of the importance of unity. His emphasis on shared purpose, his belief in the resilience of the human spirit, and his insistence on perseverance offer a roadmap for overcoming adversity. He demonstrated that even in the bleakest circumstances, hope and unity can empower individuals and communities to rise above hardship and build a better future. Winston Churchill's legacy is more than a reflection of a historical figure. It is a living influence that continues to shape modern society, inspire leaders, and encourage individuals to live with courage, resilience, and purpose. His principles, freedom, integrity, unity, and hope, remain timeless values, providing guidance in a world still striving to overcome challenges that mirror those he faced. Churchill's life offers a vision of leadership and human potential that transcends generations, reminding us that even in times of great uncertainty, we have within us the power to shape the future. As we reflect on Churchill's journey, we are reminded that his impact endures not only in history books and political doctrines but also in the everyday actions of people who carry forward his ideals. His life, marked by triumph and hardship, stands as a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the profound influence of a leader committed to a better world. In honoring Churchill's legacy, we are called to uphold the values he championed, to confront challenges with resilience, and to work together in pursuit of peace, freedom, and unity. His story, his principles, and his vision for a just and democratic world continue to resonate, inspiring us to build a future worthy of the sacrifices made by those who came before us.